Hello and welcome. I'm Duncan Price from Mind Affinity. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, and coach, and I help people to take the power of their own mind, which we're really good at finding new and exciting ways to use that to hold ourselves back and get in our own way. And I help people turn that into the very thing that moves them forward and helps them achieve more by overcoming anxiety and a whole range of other things and building confidence. That's me. Anyway, what I'm here to talk to you about today is continuing my series on exploring cognitive biases. Well, that sounds a bit boring, doesn't it? But I trust you. Trust me when I say it's actually quite interesting. So, have you ever thought about how we make the decisions that we make? In this video, we're going to be specifically looking at consistency bias. So we have certain natural tendencies, subconscious shortcuts that we take to help us to make decisions quicker. And sometimes we make those decisions without even realizing that we're being influenced by those shortcuts or by those existing beliefs or whatever it might be. So consistency bias is a really common one, and it's a bit of a sneaky one as well. You don't necessarily, it can be really easy to miss this one, even when you're aware of it and looking for it. So what is consistency bias first? Let's start with that. It is we have a natural tendency as humans to kind of assume, wrongly, that we've always felt and acted and behaved the same way that we do now. That's the really simple way of looking at it. So, for example, if I'm now a generous, giving person and I spend a lot of my time doing charitable things for others, then I'm more likely to believe that I used to be like that anyway, and that that's not something that's new. But unless you've gone through really big shifts or something has hugely derailed you, you're not likely to notice that you haven't always been that way. We tend to just assume that we've always felt a certain way about certain things. So an example of where this can be really damaging and dangerous and can have a really negative impact would be depression and anxiety and those kinds of challenges, because we assume that we've always felt that way, which is not necessarily true. But even if we have, we then extend that to assume that we always will feel that way. It's important for us to be consistent. Where does it come from? Why is that useful to us? So, as with all cognitive biases, they all start somewhere, and they tend to come from, a very primitive place. And for us, being consistent. Good morning, Higgs. Being consistent with our actions and our behaviors is a good thing, and we want to be seen to be doing that. Where it also comes in interesting, you'll see this in experiments that they do with rats, etc., where they start to repeat the same actions and things like this because they expect the reward. They're looking for patterns. We look for patterns all the time. We don't consciously necessarily realize that we're doing it, but patterns are important to us. And so this consistency helps us build patterns. And if we can understand what we used to do and how we've always behaved and that we've always been that way, here's where it really saves mental energy, because it allows us to assume that that's the kind of person that we are, and so therefore that's the way we'll continue to behave. So when we're faced with and it's not, well, it's true of big moral dilemmas, but it's also true of short little things day to day. When we're faced with needing to make a decision on something, it's so much quicker and easier for us to make that decision if we just do what we've always done. The problem is, and I'm quoting someone here, but I don't know who, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So here's how understanding this bias can really help you and be beneficial. So if you're wanting to do something new, maybe you find that you regularly hold yourself back from something, or you've got a target and a deadline that you don't quite reach, and you tend to sabotage yourself with this, some kind of behavior that gets in your way. This bias will be playing a small part in that, because if you've not, I don't know, let's say you want to get rich, just for an example. If you've never been rich before, then it's hard to imagine that you're ever going to be rich. So one of the simple ways to control for it is to really allow yourself to imagine what that person, what the future you would be like behaving that way. Where you can use this really to your advantage is that you can actually, if you really allow yourself to imagine you are that kind of person, then this consistency bias can actually kick in and go, well, if I'm that sort of person, I behave in that sort of way, and I can achieve those things. Same thing whenever you're trying to change or improve a habit, and there's a whole load of psychology behind habit forming and changing. But when you're looking to develop a new habit, like healthier eating, for example, don't think to yourself, "Oh, I'm dieting," or "I'm trying to do this," or Instead, focus on the person that you're becoming, and which is the healthier, more active person that eats balanced meals, or whatever it might be. But not just the actions, but the person that you're becoming. Because if you really focus on that, and everything that you do that succeeds, so every time you do stick to that new habit, every time you do um, achieve a measure or a goal or a step along the way, that's additional evidence that you are that kind of person. And so this consistency bias then kicks in and wants you to continue to be that kind of person and become more that kind of person. Whereas if you're constantly thinking about where you're coming from or feeling like you're not good enough and beating yourself up for the mistakes, then what you're doing each time you do that is reinforcing the consistency bias that you're unhealthy, that you don't eat well. So, so that's basically, in a nutshell, what consistency bias is. You can absolutely use it to your advantage as well. The other thing to bear in mind is that you'll see this with other people as well. So that could be something like, well, here's a great example of it. I had a friend who was a perfectly lovely person. He was a little bit selfish, but not in a bad way. He was always there when you needed him to be, etc., etc. And he started taking a lot of drugs. And he was unable to see how much he had changed, how much his personality had changed, or at least, at the very minimum, how much his actions, attitudes, and behaviors towards other people had changed hugely. But this consistency bias plays a big part in that situation of saying, oh no, I've always been this way. You're just treating me different because you don't like the fact that I'm doing drugs, or because you're jealous that I'm having fun, or because whatever. Or yes, I see it, but actually it's not as big a difference as people are making out. Which of course then justifies and allows that whole thing to continue and get even worse. So yeah, that's consistency bias. And as with all biases, understanding it better, looking out for it, testing for it, allows you to control for it, allows you to balance it, and therefore allows you to make better, healthier decisions and have more awareness of the choices that you're making. I'm Duncan from Mind Affinity. I hope that's been helpful. If you have enjoyed this, there's a whole series of them. This is the second one, or third if you include the introduction at the start. You can find them all on a playlist on my YouTube channel and also on the Mind Affinity Facebook page. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you've enjoyed this, or if there's other biases that you'd like to know more about, please do whack it in the comments or message me. I'd love to put out some content that's designed specifically for what you guys are looking for. And if you think there's anyone who could benefit from these videos, tag them in, share it. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much.